The gymnasium fell silent as 17-year-old Benjamin Rodriguez stepped onto basketball court for what everyone assumed would be another humiliating moment. At 280 pounds, Ben had endured 3 years of whispered comments and sideways glances from classmates at Roosevelt High School in Phoenix, Arizona. But today was different. Today, something extraordinary was about to unfold that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone watching. Ben had always been a kid who sat alone at lunch, headphones in, sketching in his notebook, while others played sports or gossiped about weekend plans. His weight had been a constant companion since childhood, following him to elementary school birthday parties where he was rarely invited, middle school PE classes where he was always picked last, and now high school where the social hierarchy seemed carved in stone. The Rodriguez family had struggled financially ever since Ben's father Carlos lost his construction job 2 years earlier. His mother Maria worked double shifts at the local diner, often coming home exhausted with barely enough energy to ask about homework. Fast food became a necessity rather than a choice, and Ben found comfort in the only thing that seemed consistent in his unpredictable world: food. What his classmates didn't know was that Ben possessed something remarkable. Hidden beneath layers of self-doubt and protective armor was a heart that beat with extraordinary compassion, and a mind that saw the world differently than most teenagers. While others focused on appearances and popularity, Ben noticed a lonely kid eating lunch in the bathroom, the substitute teacher struggling to maintain order, the janitor working late into the evening with a smile despite being ignored by hundreds of students daily. The basketball incident began 3 weeks earlier when Coach Thompson announced that Roosevelt High will be hosting a charity basketball game to raise funds for the Children's Cancer Ward at Phoenix General Hospital. The school star players would face off against teachers and community volunteers, with all proceeds going directly to help young cancer patients and their families. Ben watched from the bleachers as his classmates excitedly discussed their roles in the event. Star player Dylan Matthews boasted about how many points he'd score, while cheerleader Captain Madison Foster planned elaborate halftime entertainment. Everyone seemed to have a part to play except Ben, who sat quietly sketching the basketball court and wondering what it might feel like to contribute something meaningful. That evening, Ben walked past Phoenix General Hospital on his way home from his part-time job at the grocery store. Through the large windows, he glimpsed children in wheelchairs and hospital gowns, some completely bald from chemotherapy treatments, playing games in what appeared to be a recreational room. One little girl, probably no more than 8 years old, caught his attention. She was attempting to shoot a foam basketball into a miniature hoop, missing every shot but laughing with pure joy each time she tried. Something stirred deep within Ben's chest. These children were fighting battles that made his own struggles with weight and social acceptance seem small in comparison. Yet they radiated a happiness and determination that he rarely felt despite having so much more than they did. The next morning, Ben did something completely out of character. He approached Coach Thompson before first period and volunteered to help with a charity game. The coach, clearly surprised, looked Ben up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "Well, I suppose we could use someone to keep statistics or help with equipment." Coach Thompson replied with the tone adults use when they want to appear encouraging while managing expectations. "Actually," Ben said, his voice stronger than he felt, "I was hoping to play." The silence that followed was deafening. Word spread quickly through Roosevelt High that the overweight kid from third period English wanted to play basketball in front of the entire school. The reactions ranged from amused disbelief to outright mockery. Dylan Matthews laughed openly when he heard the news. Can you imagine Ben trying to run down the court? Someone should warn the opposing team about seismic activity. But Ben had made his decision. Every afternoon after school and every weekend, he began practicing alone in his backyard with a rusty hoop his father had installed years earlier. His first attempts were embarrassing even to himself. He could barely make 10 shots in a row without gasping for breath, and his accuracy was laughable. However, something remarkable began happening as the weeks progressed. The more Ben practiced, the more he remembered why he loved basketball as a young child before weight and self-consciousness took over. There was something pure about the rhythm of dribbling, the focus required for shooting, and the simple satisfaction of improvement through repetition. More importantly, every time Ben felt like quitting, He thought about the little girl in the hospital window. If she could keep trying despite facing something as serious as cancer, surely he could push through exhaustion and embarrassment for something as simple as basketball practice. The night before the charity game, Ben barely slept. He had managed to lose 15 pounds through his training, but he was still significantly heavier than any other player who would take the court. Doubt crept in as he imagined stumbling, missing shots, or worse, becoming the source of entertainment for an entire gymnasium full of people. Game day arrived with typical Arizona sunshine streaming through the school's windows. By evening, the gymnasium was packed beyond capacity. Parents, students, teachers, and community members filled every available seat, with many others standing along the walls. The energy was electric, but Ben felt nauseous as he sat at the end of the bench in his oversized jersey. The game progressed as expected for the first 3 quarters. The student team dominated, with Dylan Matthews putting on a spectacular show of athletic ability. The score was lopsided, but the crowd remained enthusiastic because they knew their ticket purchases and concession stand spending were supporting a worthy cause. With 2 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter, Coach Thompson looked down the bench at Ben. The outcome was no longer in question, and perhaps it was time to honor the commitment he had made weeks earlier. "Rodriguez, you're in." The gymnasium noise faded to an eerie quiet as Ben stood up and walked to the scorer's table. Students pulled out their phones, expecting to record what they assumed would be either a disaster or comedy material for social media. Ben's hands shook as he checked into the game. Dylan Matthews walked over and, to his credit, offered some genuine encouragement. "Just do your best, man. Have fun out there." The first time Ben touched the ball, he nearly lost it immediately. His nervousness was obvious to everyone watching. But as play continued, something began to shift. Ben remembered his countless hours of practice, his motivation, and most importantly, his purpose for being there. With 30 seconds remaining, Ben found himself with the basketball near the three-point line. The opposing team had stopped defending him closely, assuming he posed no real threat. The crowd held its breath, not sure whether to cheer or cringe. Ben thought about the little girl in the hospital window. He thought about his parents working so hard to provide for their family. He thought about all the times he had felt invisible or worthless. But mostly, he thought about the children who would benefit from this fundraising event and how their courage in fighting cancer dwarfed his fear of missing a basketball shot. Ben raised the ball, focused on the rim, and released what would become the most talked about shot in Roosevelt High School history. The basketball arced through the air in what seemed like slow motion, sailing cleanly through the net without touching the rim. The silence lasted for exactly 2 seconds before the gymnasium erupted in chaos. Students who had mocked Ben weeks earlier were on their feet cheering. Teachers were wiping away tears. Parents were applauding not just for a successful basketball shot, but for the courage it represented. But the story doesn't end there. As Ben jogged back down the court with the biggest smile anyone had ever seen on his face, something even more remarkable was happening in the crowd. Students began chanting his name, not mockingly, but with genuine admiration and respect. After the game, as Ben was leaving the locker room, he was approached by Emma Chun, a quiet girl from his chemistry class whom he had occasionally shared kind words with but never really knew. "That was incredible," she said, "but I want to tell you something else. I've been watching you this semester, and I've noticed how kind you are to everyone. You help kids pick up drop books. You smile at the custodial staff. You even stood up to those bullies picking on the new freshmen last month when you thought no one was looking." Ben was stunned. He had no idea anyone had noticed his small acts of kindness. Emma continued, "That basketball shot was amazing, but what's really amazing is who you are as a person. You proved something tonight, but not what everyone thinks. You proved that courage isn't about being the biggest or strongest or most popular. It's about showing up as yourself and caring about something bigger than your own fears." The charity game raised more money than any previous school fundraiser in Roosevelt High's history. But more importantly, it sparked something within the student body. Ben's act of courage gave others permission to step outside their comfort zones, to support each other more openly, and to recognize that everyone has value regardless of appearance or social status. Ben continued practicing basketball, not because he dreamed of becoming a star athlete, but because he had discovered that pushing through challenges brought out the best version of himself. He lost 40 more pounds over the next year, not through extreme dieting, but through consistent activity and the confidence that came from knowing he could accomplish difficult things. By graduation, Ben had become one of the most respected students at Roosevelt High, not for his athletic achievements, but for his character. He organized food drives, tutored struggling students, and continued volunteering at the Children's Hospital where he first found his inspiration. The little girl Ben had seen through the hospital window, whose courage had motivated his entire journey, eventually recovered fully from her cancer treatment. When Ben met her months later during one of his volunteer visits, she told him something that brought tears to his eyes. "The nurses told me about the basketball game that raised money for kids like me. They said a brave student made an amazing shot to help us. Thank you for caring about people you didn't even know." Ben's story reminds us that true courage isn't about being fearless. It's about feeling afraid and choosing to act with kindness anyway. It's about recognizing that our individual struggles become meaningful when we use them to help others. Most importantly, it shows us that one act of courage can create ripples of positive change that extend far beyond what we can imagine. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply show up as our authentic selves and care about something bigger than our own insecurities. When we do that, we often discover that the very qualities we thought made us weak actually make us uniquely capable of touching other people's lives. If Ben's story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Pure Kindness Stories for more inspiring tales of everyday heroes. Share this story with someone who might need a reminder that they have the power to make a difference, no matter what challenges they're facing. Together, we can create a world where kindness and courage are celebrated, and where everyone feels valued for who they truly are.